We don't need old men like you dragging us down," she declared, her voice sharp and dismissive, punctuated by a dramatic toss of her impeccably styled, dark hair, as if terminating my nearly 2-decade tenure was a mere procedural formality, a box to be checked. My name is Stanley Rowe, a name that evokes steadiness, perhaps a touch of the antiquated, and at 59 years old, I suppose I fit the old man archetype in her eyes. For the past 18 years, I had been the operations manager at Harper Machinery, a cornerstone of industrial manufacturing located in Indianapolis, Indiana. I wasn't the type to dominate meetings with grand pronouncements, nor did I seek the spotlight or engage in boardroom theatrics. My role was far more fundamental, less glamorous. I was the quiet, unwavering hand, the unseen force that ensured the intricate gears of production continued to turn, day in and day out. Harper Machinery supplied industrial equipment to more than half the factories dotting the Midwest landscape, a testament to its reliability and the consistent output I painstakingly maintained. In response to her thinly veiled contempt, I offered only a faint, sarcastic smile that didn't quite reach my eyes, followed by a singular, curt nod of acceptance. Then, without a word, I turned and walked out of Vanessa's office, leaving behind the sterile, polished space that now symbolized a jarring shift in the company's ethos. There were no arguments, no threats hurled across the plush carpet, no dramatic scenes or emotional outbursts from my end. Just a quiet, methodical process of clearing out my desk, packing almost 2 decades of my professional life, carefully condensed into a single, rather flimsy cardboard box. As I did so, the younger members of the staff, many of whom I had personally hired and mentored from their teenage years into adulthood, now men and women with their own families and mortgages, conspicuously averted their gaze. Their silence was palpable, a heavy cloak of awkwardness and perhaps a touch of unspoken guilt. Not a single soul uttered a word of farewell, a thank you, or even a simple acknowledgement as I carefully folded the memories and milestones of my career into that pathetic carton. Charles Harper, a man of profound integrity and unparalleled work ethic, had built this company from the ground up, starting 43 years ago with nothing but a single, used lathe squeezed into his modest garage. Through sheer grit, relentless determination, and an unblemished reputation for manufacturing incredibly reliable machinery, he had transformed that humble beginning into a thriving $30 million enterprise. It was Charles himself, when his health began to falter, who had personally selected me to run operations. "You're the only one I trust not to cut corners, Stanley," he had confided, his words a heavy mantle of responsibility and trust that I had worn with pride. Now, his 28-year-old daughter Vanessa, armed with a recently acquired business degree and 2 brief years of what she deemed real-world experience, living a seemingly cosmopolitan life in Miami, had unilaterally decided the company was in dire need of modernization and fresh perspectives. These, I understood, were thinly veiled corporate euphemisms for systematically purging anyone who harbored the institutional memory of how things were done, before every ounce of common sense was supplanted by the cold, sterile logic of spreadsheets and quarterly reports. As I walked towards my pickup truck, the flimsy cardboard box cradled awkwardly in my arms, containing the entirety of my professional existence at Harper Machinery. A strange, unexpected sense of calm settled over me. It was a peculiar tranquility that stemmed from a quiet, almost smug certainty. Because what Vanessa, in her youthful hubris and blatant disregard for the past, didn't know, what she hadn't even bothered to investigate or check, was the very specific, meticulously crafted clause embedded deep within my employment contract. It was a provision that Charles himself, foreseeing the relentless predatory tactics of competitors, had insisted upon. This clause, designed explicitly to prevent me from being poached by rival firms, stipulated a severe severance penalty should I be terminated without cause, As meticulously defined within the contract, Harper Machinery would be obligated to pay me the equivalent of 2 full years of my salary. I gently placed the box on the passenger seat, its weight a physical manifestation of my now defunct career, and sat there for a long minute, my hands resting loosely on the steering wheel, a silent tableau of contemplation. Through the expansive windshield, my gaze swept across the sprawling production floor, a landscape of humming machinery and bustling activity. I saw the equipment I had personally maintained, the complex systems I had painstakingly implemented, the faces of the people I had hired and trained. All of them now unknowingly on the cusp of discovering the profound, often disruptive vacuum created when vital institutional knowledge abruptly walks out the door. I didn't slam the truck door in a fit of rage, nor did I screech out of the parking lot in a blaze of indignant tires. Instead, I simply turned the key, shifted the truck into drive, and calmly headed home, already formulating the mental steps to call Harold Preston, a shrewd lawyer friend who, I knew, had been patiently waiting for an excuse, any excuse, to sink his teeth into a corporate case as refreshingly straightforward as this one promised to be. My life, both personal and professional, had always eschewed flashiness and ostentation. For 29 years, I had been married to my beloved wife, Linda, before cancer cruelly claimed her 4 years ago. Leaving a void that time had softened but never truly filled. Together, we had raised 2 remarkable children, both of whom were thriving in their respective lives. My son, a sharp engineer, was making a name for himself at a firm in Denver, and my daughter, a compassionate educator, was shaping young minds as a third-grade teacher in Cleveland. My existence had been meticulously built upon the bedrock of consistency, reliability, and an unwavering commitment to quiet competence. The very same principles I had meticulously applied to my work at Harper Machinery. Charles Harper had been far more than just a demanding boss. In many profound ways, he had filled the paternal void left by my own father, who had inexplicably vanished from our lives when I was a mere 11 years old, leaving my steadfast mother to valiantly raise 3 rambunctious boys on the meager salary of a secretary. Charles had taken a monumental chance on me when I was 40. A pivotal point in my life, recently laid off from a dying automotive plant. Armed with little more than extensive hands, on experience and a practical community college degree in mechanical engineering. Credentials don't build machines, Stanley. Charles had famously declared during my interview, his gruff voice softened by an underlying wisdom. Men with sense and skill do. He had seen something in me, a raw, untapped potential, and within 2 short years, he had promoted me to operations manager, a position I would hold with unwavering dedication for the next 18. Charles and I weren't the kind of men who would embark on leisurely fishing trips together or unwind at a local bar after a grueling day's work. Our bond was forged in the crucible of shared purpose and mutual respect, a connection that transcended the confines of the workplace. When Linda fell ill, a dark cloud settling over our lives, it was Charles, without a word from me, who discreetly rearranged my work schedule, ensuring I could accompany her to every single treatment, every difficult appointment. Family first, Stanley, he had insisted, his voice imbued with genuine empathy, always. The first subtle yet disquieting warning sign of the impending seismic shift at Harper Machinery emerged approximately a year ago, coinciding with Vanessa's initial, tentative appearances at various corporate meetings. Fresh out of business school, she would stride into the room, exuding an almost aggressively confident aura, clutching a sleek leather portfolio, and leaving a lingering trail of expensive perfume that seemed to precede her by several seconds. Her discourse was peppered with the latest, trend-driven buzzwords: synergy, market disruption, paradigm shifts, phrases that sounded impressive but often lacked substantive meaning when applied to the gritty reality of manufacturing. I would frequently catch Charles, perched quietly at the head of the table, wincing almost imperceptibly at some of her more audacious suggestions. Proposals that, had they been implemented, would have undoubtedly gutted our meticulously maintained quality control standards, or flagrantly outsourced critical components we had always proudly fabricated in-house. Yet, despite his visible discomfort, Charles never publicly contradicted her. He would simply quietly, behind the scenes, mend the damage, deftly correcting the course she attempted to set. "She needs to learn, Stanley," he had explained to me one afternoon, his lean frame propped warily against my office doorframe, his gaze distant. "Some lessons, the truly important ones, can't be gleaned from books or business school lectures." He held a faith, perhaps misplaced, that practical experience would eventually temper her academic zeal. The second, far more ominous warning materialized 3 months ago when Charles, with a visibly heavy heart, announced his impending retirement. He attributed it to heart problems, a convenient and plausible explanation, though I strongly suspected it was more a surrender, a quiet capitulation to the relentless, burgeoning pressure from Vanessa to hand over the reins. He looked profoundly defeated, a man utterly drained of his life force, when he handed me the updated organizational chart. Vanessa's name, emblazoned confidently at the very top, seemed to mock the decades of painstaking effort Charles had poured into the company. "I made her promise to keep the core team intact, Stanley," he had murmured, his gaze deliberately avoiding mine, flickering evasively around the room. "The experience you all bring, that's what truly makes this place work." I simply nodded, a tight knot forming in the pit of my stomach. Something deep inside me tightened, a primal instinct screaming a warning. The way Charles couldn't bring himself to meet my gaze, like a man burdened by an unspeakable secret, suggested he knew precisely what was coming, but lacked the courage or the will to articulate it. It was a silent prophecy, and I felt its cold shadow stretching towards me. The morning after my rather unceremonious termination, I found myself sitting at my familiar kitchen table, the well-worn surface providing a comforting anchor in a suddenly destabilized world. Spread out before me, under the comforting beam of the morning light, was my employment contract, meticulously reviewed by Harold Preston, who was already on the case. It was precisely at that moment, as I absorbed the legal jargon, that my phone vibrated, illuminating the screen with a name that brought a jolt of recognition and a pang of complex emotions. Charles Harper. I almost didn't answer it. Almost. My finger hovered over the decline button, a fleeting impulse to sever ties completely. But 18 years of shared history, of unspoken understanding, of profound mutual respect, doesn't simply vanish overnight, regardless of how acrimonious the previous day's events had been. "Stanley." Charles's voice came through the receiver, strained and thin, laden with an unmistakable undercurrent of distress. "What the hell happened yesterday?" "Ask your daughter, Charles," I replied, my tone deliberately neutral, devoid of anger or accusation, simply stating facts, stark and unembellished. "I did," he sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "She said you were." He paused, clearly searching for an appropriate, less inflammatory euphemism. "Resistant to the new direction. Said you were undermining her authority with the floor team." I said nothing, just let the silence stretch between us, a gaping chasm filled with unspoken truths. Charles knew me better than that. Knew, unequivocally, that I would never undermine anyone, that my loyalty, once earned, was absolute. His pause was an acknowledgement of that very truth, a moment of internal conflict. "You're going to file, aren't you?" he finally asked, his voice laced with a wary inevitability. "Already have." I confirmed, my voice as steady as always. "Harold Preston is handling it." Charles exhaled heavily, a sound of profound disappointment and regret. "I told her to look at the contracts," he revealed, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Told her before I stepped down that there were protections in place." For everyone. Another weighty pause. She said she cleaned house yesterday. You, Thomas, Jennifer, anyone over 50. My jaw tightened, a muscle clenching involuntarily. Thomas Baldwin, our head of engineering for 12 years, was an irreplaceable genius, a man whose encyclopedic knowledge of hydraulics bordered on the mythical. Jennifer Lee, the meticulous guardian of our quality control lab, ran it with the fierce proprietary pride of someone defending their personal kingdom, her precision unmatched. Both, in their own unique ways, were utterly indispensable. Is that the direction you wanted, Charles? I asked, my voice still calm, but now imbued with a quiet challenge. Clearing out everyone who built this place with you. You know it's not, he replied, his voice a strained whisper, burdened by a deep, bone-weary fatigue. But I gave her control. It's hers to run now. I heard muffled voices in the background on his end, one of them distinctly Vanessa's. Sharp, demanding, imperious. I've got to go, Charles said quickly, an abruptness in his tone. She's... The call ended abruptly, a click severing the connection. I set the phone down, its screen now dark, and stared at my contract, spread open across the table like an ancient parchment. My eyes fixated on Section 12, Paragraph 3. In the event of termination without documented cause as defined in Appendix C, employee shall be entitled to severance compensation equal to 24 months of current salary. Harold had highlighted it in a vibrant, almost triumphant yellow. It's airtight, he had assured me earlier, his craggy face creased with professional satisfaction. They'll either pay, or we'll take them to court where we'll not only win, but they'll also be footing my fees. I rose from the table and walked to the window overlooking my backyard, a familiar sanctuary. The magnificent maple tree, which Linda and I had lovingly planted when we first moved into this home 26 years ago, now towered majestically over the property, its branches reaching skyward in a defiant embrace of life. We had nurtured it through 2 brutal lightning strikes, and a relentless disease that had nearly claimed its life. We had patched it up, supported its wounded limbs, provided it with everything it needed to not just survive, but to truly thrive, to flourish into the resilient sentinel it was today. Something fundamental shifted inside me at that moment. This wasn't merely about the money anymore, substantial as it was. Nor was it truly about petty revenge, though a flicker of satisfaction at Vanessa's comeuppance was undeniable. It was about something far deeper, something intrinsically tied to the roots of that towering maple. It was about inherent value, about the profound recognition of what hard-earned experience truly brings to the table, the immeasurable wisdom that accrues over decades of dedicated work. It was about respecting the very foundation, the meticulously laid groundwork that others had painstakingly built long before you. In your youthful zeal, decided it was time to renovate the house. I picked up my phone, my fingers moving with a newfound sense of purpose, and called Thomas, then Jennifer. By noon, I had personally spoken with every single veteran employee Vanessa had ruthlessly axed from the company. Some were utterly shell-shocked, their voices barely above a whisper, reeling from the sudden, inexplicable blow. Others were seething with barely contained fury, a hot, indignant rage at the injustice. And all of them, without exception, were profoundly worried about their suddenly uncertain futures. Take a breath. I calmly advised each of them, my voice a steady anchor in their storm. Check your contracts, call Harold. And then, after those essential calls, I made one more, perhaps the most strategically significant of all. I called Douglas Klein, the astute and well-respected owner of Precision Parts, a rival firm located across town. Douglas was a man who, for years, had been relentlessly attempting to poach me away from Harper. Recognizing the value I brought, still interested in that conversation, Douglas, I asked him, a subtle but distinct note of quiet intent in my voice. 3 days following my termination, I found myself seated across from Vanessa Harper and Harper Machinery's corporate attorney in a sleek, impersonal downtown office. Harold Preston, my legal counsel, sat stoically beside me, his weathered, well-traveled briefcase open on the table, my meticulously highlighted contract prominently displayed, a silent yet potent weapon. "This is ridiculous," Vanessa declared, her voice laced with disdain, not even bothering to glance at the document that lay open before her. "We're implementing a new direction for the company. That's cause enough for termination." Harold, a man of 67 years, possessed the patient, almost serene demeanor of someone who had witnessed every corporate trick, every legal maneuver, every thinly veiled lie imaginable. He simply, without uttering a word, pointed a steady finger to the highlighted clause. "Termination without cause as defined in Appendix C requires severance equal to 24 months' salary, approximately $300,000 in Mr. Rowe's case." The corporate lawyer, a young man named Justin, who looked as if he had just been freshly minted from law school, began to scan the contract with a visibly growing discomfort, his youthful face betraying a dawning realization of the legal quagmire they were in. "Miss Harper," Justin began, his voice hesitant, "the definition of cause here is quite specific. It enumerates performance issues, ethical violations, criminal acts." "He was resistant to change," Vanessa interrupted, her arms crossing defensively over her chest, her voice rising in frustration. "That's insubordination. Where's the documentation?" Harold interjected calmly, his voice a quiet counterpoint to her agitation. "Written warnings. Performance improvement plans. Because Appendix C requires a documented pattern of insubordination, not a single, subjective instance of perceived resistance." Justin, visibly flustered, flipped through a thin, almost empty folder in front of him, finding nothing to corroborate Vanessa's claims. Vanessa's face tightened, a mask of barely suppressed fury. "Fine. So we pay him a few months' severance and move on. This is a waste of time." 24 months, Harold corrected patiently, his voice unwavering, "as stipulated in the contract." "That's ridiculous!" she snapped, her composure fraying. "We'll offer 6 months. Take it or leave it." I remained silent throughout the exchange, watching her intently. In that particular moment, despite her youthful arrogance, she uncannily reminded me of her father, the same stubborn, defiant set to her jaw, the same unyielding glint in her eyes. But Charles's stubbornness had always been in the service of building something enduring, something of tangible value. Hers, it seemed, was solely aimed at tearing down. Harold, without a word, simply closed his briefcase with a soft click, a decisive, final sound. "Then we'll proceed with legal action," he stated, his voice calm, yet carrying the weight of an unshakable resolve. "Discovery should prove particularly interesting, especially regarding the simultaneous termination of multiple employees over 50. Justin's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and he leaned towards Vanessa, whispering something urgent and rapid into her ear. She brushed him off, her dismissive gesture speaking volumes. "Before you make threats," Vanessa said to me, completely ignoring Harold's presence as if he were invisible, "you should know we're prepared to fight this. You'll be tied up in court for years." I finally spoke, my voice low and steady. "I've got time. And we'll make it known throughout the industry that you're difficult," she added, her tone laced with venom. "Good luck finding another position at your age." It was precisely then that her father, Charles, appeared silently in the doorway, a spectral presence. I hadn't seen him since his retirement party, and the transformation was stark. He looked noticeably thinner, his complexion paler, almost translucent, but his eyes, those sharp, discerning eyes, were as piercing and clear as ever. "Vanessa," he said quietly, his voice an almost imperceptible murmur that nonetheless cut through the tension. "A word. We're in the middle of something, Dad," she began, irritation palpable in her tone. "Now," he repeated, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. It was not a request. They stepped outside the conference room, and through the glass wall, I could clearly see them. Charles was gesturing emphatically, his frail frame imbued with an unexpected forcefulness, while Vanessa's posture grew increasingly defensive, her arms still crossed tightly across her chest. When they returned, the silence that followed them was heavy. Vanessa pointedly avoided my gaze, her eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the room. "Justin," Charles said, his voice now devoid of its earlier fatigue, imbued with a quiet authority, "prepare the severance agreement as written in the contract." "Dad." Vanessa started, her voice a desperate plea.
"Not now."
Charles then turned to me, his gaze finally meeting mine, filled with an expression of profound regret. "I apologize, Stanley. This isn't how I wanted things to end." I nodded once, a subtle inclination of my head. Nothing more needed to be said between us. As Harold and I rose to leave, a quiet sense of victory simmering beneath my calm exterior, Vanessa stepped directly in front of me, blocking my path. "This isn't over," she spat, her eyes narrowed in a fierce, unyielding glare. "I'll be reviewing all vendor relationships. Any company that hires you can forget about doing business with Harper." Charles paled visibly at her words, a flicker of genuine shock crossing his face, but he remained silent, perhaps too wary to intervene further. I simply nodded again, a small, knowing gesture, my thoughts already drifting to my conversation with Douglas Klein the day before. The partnership offer he had extended, the lucrative niche market Harper had inexplicably ignored for years. A market Precision Parts was now perfectly poised to enter and dominate. "You're right about one thing," I told her, my voice quiet but firm, a ripple of future intent hidden beneath its surface. "It isn't over." The severance payment, a sum of $320,000 before taxes, hit my account exactly a week later. It was more money than I had ever seen at once, a staggering amount that should have brought a profound sense of vindication, a triumphant surge of satisfaction. Instead, I felt hollow. The money wasn't the point. Neither truly was revenge, though a part of me acknowledged the exquisite irony of Vanessa footing the bill for her own short-sightedness. It was about something deeper, something more fundamental. That same afternoon, guided by a quiet, burgeoning purpose, I met Thomas Baldwin, our brilliant former head of engineering, at a diner located precisely halfway between our respective homes. The place was nearly empty at 3 in the afternoon, a quiet haven of plastic booths and fluorescent lighting, save for a couple of truckers, nursing their coffee at the counter, and us, tucked away in a secluded back booth. "Harold got me a year's severance," Thomas said, stirring his coffee with a spoon, though he didn't take a sip, his gaze distant. "Not as good as your deal, Stanley, but certainly better than nothing." "They want you to sign an NDA?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Thomas nodded, a bitter smile playing on his lips. "Can't talk about proprietary processes or business practices for 5 years. 40 years in engineering." He let out a short, hollow laugh. "And suddenly I can't talk about my own work." "Are you signing it?" "Don't see much choice, Stanley. Got a granddaughter starting college next year." The resignation in his voice was palpable, a stark reminder of the crushing weight of responsibility. I pushed a plain white business card across the table, sliding it gently until it rested directly in front of him. "Douglas Klein, Precision Parts." It read simply. "He's looking for a consultant," I explained, watching his reaction carefully. "Someone who understands precision hydraulics. No NDA required for general industry knowledge." Thomas stared at the card, a slow, hesitant flicker of hope in his eyes, quickly followed by a shadow of concern. "Harper would sue me if I took this." "Not if you're just advising on general industry standards," I countered, my voice low and reassuring. "There's nothing proprietary about fundamental principles of hydraulics." He picked up the card slowly, turning it over in his fingers, the action deliberate. "What's going on, Stanley?" he asked, his brow furrowed with curiosity. This isn't like you. Stirring the pot. I hadn't yet told anyone about my new arrangement with Douglas. But Thomas, a man with whom I had worked side by side for over a decade, deserved to know. I'm partnering with Precision, I said quietly, the words feeling both momentous and liberating. Douglas is bringing me in to head up a new division. Specialized hydraulic components. The small batch, high-margin stuff Vanessa thinks is a waste of time. Thomas's eyebrows shot up, a look of genuine surprise. The custom work. Charles always said that was Harper's future. At Vanessa's killing it. I confirmed, a note of quiet certainty in my voice. To focus on mass production. Thinks she can compete with overseas manufacturers on price. She can't, Thomas said flatly, his years of experience lending authority to his words. Not with our labor costs and quality standards. I know.
So does Charles.
Thomas leaned forward, his eyes suddenly sharp, piercing. Is that why you're telling me this, Stanley? You think Charles is involved somehow? I shook my head. No. But I had lunch with Jennifer yesterday. Jennifer, our former head of quality control, had her ear to the ground. She said Vanessa's been liquidating equipment. The specialized machinery Charles bought last year specifically for the custom work. She's already sold half of it. That's over $2 million in equipment, Thomas exclaimed, his eyes wide with disbelief. At auction prices, she probably got 30 cents on the dollar. Thomas sat back, the realization dawning on him, a grim understanding spreading across his face. She's stripping the company, converting assets to cash. I nodded slowly. And guess who's been buying property in Miami? Jesus. Thomas muttered, running a hand over his face, a gesture of profound distress. Does Charles know about this? I don't think so. He built that company for legacy, Thomas, not liquidation. He built it to last. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the implications settling heavily between us. Not just for us, the displaced veterans, but for the 100+ employees still laboring at Harper, for Charles's entire life's work, his meticulously crafted legacy. What are you going to do? Thomas finally asked, his voice low. Build something better, I said simply, the words infused with quiet resolve. Something that respects both the past and the future. With Douglas Klein. Thomas sounded skeptical, a hint of his earlier cynicism returning. Douglas is just an investor, Stanley. He's 2 years from retirement himself. He wants to back people who know what they're doing, then step aside. And let me guess. Thomas continued, a slow smile spreading across his face. You need an engineer who understands hydraulics. I smiled for the first time in weeks, a genuine, unforced smile that reached my eyes. The position's yours if you want it. Once your NDA is limited to actually proprietary information, not general industry knowledge. Thomas studied me for a long moment, his gaze unwavering. This isn't just business for you, is it? He observed, a knowing glint in his eyes. It's personal. It's about value, I said, my voice soft but firm, articulating a deeply held conviction. About building something that lasts. That's all I've ever truly wanted to do. 2 months after my termination from Harper Machinery, I found myself sitting in Douglas Klein's spacious, sun-drenched office, meticulously reviewing the intricate architectural plans for our new facility. The converted warehouse, a sprawling, utilitarian structure on the east side of Indianapolis, would soon become the proud home of Cornerstone Precision, our burgeoning new venture specializing in bespoke, custom hydraulic components. The name, Cornerstone, had been Thomas's inspired idea. Build from the corners up. He had declared with conviction. That's how you make something that truly lasts, something enduring. Douglas, a barrel-chested man with a luxuriant, full white beard that cascaded down his chest, and perpetually rolled-up sleeves that hinted at a hands, on approach, spread the initial supplier contracts across his desk with a satisfied flourish. Machine shops confirmed. He announced, his voice booming with quiet triumph. They can deliver the first 5 units by next month. And the CNC programmer. He paused, a knowing look in his piercing blue eyes. Starts Monday. Former Harper employee. Said you recommended us. I nodded, a subtle confirmation. Jason Wright had been an unsung hero at Harper for 6 years. A brilliant mind with computer modeling. Criminally underpaid for his immense talent. Vanessa, in her misguided quest for efficiency, had slashed his department's budget by a draconian 30%, while simultaneously, and quite brazenly, doubling her own exorbitant salary. He had quit in disgust 2 weeks prior. How many does that make now? Douglas inquired, his voice laced with a mixture of admiration and quiet concern. 7, I replied, a sense of grim satisfaction mingled with regret. All top performers, all essential. Douglas whistled low, a sound of genuine surprise. Harper's losing talent fast. Stanley. People follow good leadership. Douglas. I stated simply, a fundamental truth that Vanessa seemed utterly incapable of grasping. Vanessa's not providing it. My phone buzzed softly in my pocket, a discreet vibration. A text message from Jennifer. Still embedded within Harper's quality control lab. With her retirement a mere 3 years away. She couldn't afford the financial risk of leaving, but she could certainly keep her eyes wide open and her ears to the ground, feeding me vital information. The message contained a grainy photo of an internal memo, production delays, quality control issues, 3 major clients threatening to pull contracts over missed deadlines. I showed it to Douglas, who adjusted his reading glasses, his gaze sharpening as he scanned the damning evidence. Just as we predicted, he observed, a wary sigh escaping his lips. The brain drain's affecting output already. I pocketed my phone, feeling no sense of satisfaction or vindication from the news. Harper still employed families I had known for years. People with mortgages, with children in college, with elderly parents in nursing homes. Their suffering was never my goal, never my desired outcome. We should reach out to Midwest Manufacturing. I suggested, referring to one of Harper's biggest, most lucrative clients, a company now undoubtedly feeling the pinch of Harper's spiraling incompetence. Let them know we'll be operational in 60 days. Douglas nodded, making a swift note on a legal pad. Already scheduled a meeting for next week. Their purchasing managers are eager to talk. I stood and walked to the large window, overlooking the bustling warehouse floor below. Workers were efficiently installing the first pieces of heavy equipment, the very bones of something new, something vital, a venture built not on cost, cutting and corporate jargon, but on a profound respect for both seasoned experience and innovative thinking. An endeavor where both could flourish in harmony. My phone rang again, the screen illuminating with Charles Harper's name. I should take this, I told Douglas, who simply nodded understandingly and stepped out, gently closing the door behind him, granting me privacy. Charles, I answered, my voice calm, expecting the inevitable. Stanley. His voice came through, sounding even more tired, more utterly defeated than before, tinged with a desperate edge. We need to talk. I'm listening. A heavy sigh. I know what you're doing. The new company. The Harper employees you're hiring away. I said nothing. It wasn't illegal, wasn't even unethical, just plain, old-fashioned business, and good business at that. I'm not calling to ask you to stop. Charles continued, his words catching me off guard, a ripple of surprise running through me. I'm calling to ask for your help. What kind of help? I asked, cautious, trying to gauge the true depth of his desperation. The kind that might save what's left of my company. He paused, the weight of his admission hanging in the air. Vanessa's been selling off assets, cutting corners on quality. The board's concerned. So am I. Stanley, deeply concerned. Why tell me this, Charles? Because you're the only one who knows every part of the operation. He explained, his voice laced with a raw honesty. The only one who might see a path forward. Another pause, heavy with regret. And because I should have listened to you months ago, when you warned me she wasn't ready. You were right, Stanley. So damn right. I closed my eyes, a rush of memories washing over me. All those years working alongside Charles, shoulder to shoulder, building something we were both profoundly proud of. Something that employed hundreds of people who trusted us to make good, ethical decisions, to safeguard their livelihoods. What exactly are you asking, Charles? Come to my house tonight. 7. Bring Thomas if he's willing. His voice strengthened slightly, a flicker of his old resolve returning. The board wants to meet to discuss options. Options. Yes, including a change in leadership. I looked down at the warehouse floor again, at our small but steadily growing operation, at the tangible future I had been meticulously building. Out of the ashes of betrayal and dismissal. I'll be there, I said, finally, a quiet commitment forming. But I'm not promising anything. Fair enough. Relief was evident in his voice, a profound exhalation of pent-up worry. And Stanley? Yes, thank you. For still taking my calls, 6 months after my ignominious firing. I stood, a silent, observant presence, at the back of Harper Machinery's main conference room. The quarterly all-hands meeting had just been called to order, the hushed murmurs of the room settling into an expectant silence. Vanessa sat imperiously at the head of the polished table, flanked by her new executive team. Most of them appeared to be under 35, their youthful faces betraying a distinct nervousness, a subtle tension that belied their polished suits. My presence was not meant to be acknowledged until the very end. That had been the precise agreement brokered with the board. Let Vanessa present her quarterly results first. Give her the opportunity to explain, or perhaps obfuscate, the staggering 37% drop in revenue, the devastating loss of key contracts, the catastrophic quality control failures that had plagued the company. She was halfway through a convoluted presentation, artfully blaming unforeseen market conditions and legacy inefficiencies, the very issues she was supposed to be rectifying, when her eyes, darting nervously across the room, finally landed on me. What is he doing here? She demanded, her voice shrill with indignation, an accusatory finger jabbing in my direction. Charles, who had been sitting quietly among the board members, a picture of weary resignation, offered a subtle nod to the chairman. The chairman, a stoic, distinguished man, rose slowly to his feet. Vanessa, the chairman said, his voice measured, cutting through her outburst. The board has reached a decision regarding the company's leadership. Her face instantly went white, a stark contrast to her dark hair, all the blood draining from it. You can't be serious. Stanley, the chairman continued, turning to me, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. Would you like to explain the new arrangement? I stepped forward, holding a slim folder. It was the very same one Harold had meticulously prepared for my severance 6 months earlier, but its contents now were vastly different, profoundly transformed. Harper Machinery is merging with Cornerstone Precision. I announced, my voice steady, clear, resounding through the room, each word imbued with quiet authority. The board has approved the acquisition agreement this morning. Vanessa let out a sharp, incredulous laugh, a sound devoid of humor, laced with a desperate disbelief.
This is absurd. I'm the majority shareholder.
No, Charles said, rising slowly to his feet, his voice surprisingly strong, imbued with a newfound resolution. You hold 20%, Vanessa. I maintained 51%, which I've now voted in favor of the merger. I slid the folder across the polished table towards her, the documents a stark, undeniable testament to her undoing. Cornerstone will absorb Harper's Custom Hydraulics division. I explained calmly, watching her face crumble. The rest will continue under new leadership. My leadership, Thomas said, stepping in from the doorway. His presence a quiet, unwavering declaration, his face set with a quiet determination. Vanessa flipped frantically through the documents, her hands trembling, the crisp paper rustling with her agitated movements.
This is personal,
she choked out, her voice raw with a sudden, overwhelming emotion. This is business. I finished for her, my voice devoid of emotion, a cold, hard truth, nothing personal. A year after the merger, I stood on the expanded production facility floor, a space now humming with the combined energies of both Cornerstone Precision and Harper Custom Hydraulics. Workers moved with a quiet efficiency between stations, the rhythmic thrum of machinery creating a symphony of productivity. A sound, a feeling, I had profoundly missed during my months away. Charles joined me on the observation platform, leaning heavily on his cane, his frail frame a testament to his ongoing health struggles. Yet, despite his physical decline, his spirit had undeniably soared. Watching the company, his life's work, not just survive but truly thrive again, had proven to be the most potent medicine. Quarterly numbers just came in, he said, a quiet pride in his voice as he handed me a report. Best in 5 years. I nodded, scanning the impressive figures, profit margins significantly up, employee retention miraculously stabilized, 3 new patents filed, securing our future innovations. Vanessa called yesterday, Charles added quietly, his gaze fixed on the bustling floor below. From Miami. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing, allowing him to continue. After the merger, she had taken her generous settlement and seemingly vanished, leaving no goodbyes, no apologies, just a vacuum. She's starting a consulting firm. He continued, a faint, sad smile touching his lips. Astute and vested. Will you? I started to ask, referring to her potential return. Charles shook his head. Told her to come back to Indianapolis first. Learn the business from the ground up, the way I did, the way you did. He paused, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. And she hung up on me. He chuckled softly, a dry, wary sound. But she called back this morning. Asked if the offer still stood. Below us, I watched Jason, our brilliant CNC programmer, patiently training 2 new programmers on our latest, most advanced system. A testament to knowledge transfer and growth. Jennifer, in her crisp lab coat, meticulously inspected components with her characteristic precision, her unwavering commitment to quality a reassuring constant. Thomas, at a workstation, sketched a complex design modification by hand, his seasoned experience flowing onto paper before he transferred it to the computer. Experience and innovation, finally, were working side by side. Not in conflict, not one replacing the other, but building something infinitely stronger, something truly enduring together. You know, Stanley, Charles said, his voice soft, reflective. When I wrote that severance clause in your contract, all those years ago, I never, not for a moment, imagined how it would ultimately turn out. I smiled, a genuine, expansive smile that reached my eyes. Neither did I, Charles. Neither did I. We stood in a comfortable, companionable silence, watching the company we had both, in our own ways, helped to build and rebuild, continue its onward trajectory, growing stronger with each passing day. Some lessons, I reflected, are undeniably expensive. But the ones that truly stick, the ones that profoundly change how we see the world, how we understand value and legacy, those are always, unequivocally worth the price.